Hello and welcome to this iOS video. Today I want to talk about the init method of NSObject and overriding it, and also a little bit about instance or object methods in general. So we're going to talk about that today by creating a new Xcode project, and I'm going to call this project, well, it's a command line tool again. We won't get into iOS coding here in this unit, and I'm going to call this project init override, and I'll accept the rest of these. Xcode is very sticky. When you bring up a new project or start a new project, it uses the settings that you last used. So we're going to use the foundation framework, and also we're going to use automatic reference counting. So we'll click on next, and then we'll save it in the chapter 1 video file folder. And I want to show you how to drag in a class from another project. So if we right click and say add files to init override, or add files to this project, and then go back to our folder structure and go to our objects project, open that up. We want to grab the part.h and part.m file, and then make sure that when this destination checkbox, copy items into destinations group folder if needed, is checked. And then we'll click add, and now we have our part. We have part.h and part.m. And this promotes code reuse, allows us to reuse our code that our classes that we used before. Also, we know that we can, just sort of a review, got the wrong one, we know that we can make a property out of name, and these are going to be assign properties, so non-atomic assign. And once again, they're assign properties because these are C scalar types or C primitive types. So the first one is a car star string and name, and then let's just grab this and copy it and paste it here, and this one is going to be an int and then number. And then we can get rid of this, we know, and we can get rid of all of this. And we can get rid of all of this because the next thing we're going to do is synthesize our name and our number. And that will actually give us the getters and the setters, right? And then we can get rid of these. Okay. Now, I'm not going to do the report method in this one. All I'm going to do here is show you a technique. It would be good if we could make a part with a certain name and a number. So if we go back to main.m, main.m doesn't have anything in it. So wouldn't it be nice if we could say something like part, my part, and of course this needs to be a pointer, sorry about that, is equal to, and then part Alec, and then something like init with name, and we'll call it widget, and number, and we'll say 37, or 36 is good too. Okay. Now, look at the structure of this message. We have the name, init with name, colon, and number, and we have our parameters, and they are interleaved within the name. So this is the structure of a Objective-C method, we have the parameters interleaved with the method name, and we use colons to separate each piece of the parameter from each piece of the name with each piece of the parameter list. So this says in English, init with name widget and number 36. And this is kind of a legacy from the Smalltalk programming language that is folded in to the C programming language to create Objective-C. Now, Objective-C methods then are interleaved. Now, what are we going to have to do here to make this work? Well, we know that we're going to need in part. So we know we need this init with name and number method. The question is, how do we get it to be an initializer method? The answer is that we want it to return a type of any object. And there is a keyword in Objective-C for any object, and that keyword is ID. So what we need to do is use an instance method, and an instance method begins with a dash, and I'm going to return type ID. Now, it's not ID pointer because ID is already a pointer. We can see in the tooltip here that ID is a pointer to an instance of a class, and this is any class. So when we either override init, NSObjects or create our own initializer method, we need to return a value of type ID, and I'll show you what we're going to return here in a moment. So now this method is called init with name, colon, and it takes a car star, and we'll call this part name, and number, second part of our method name, and this is an int parameter, and we'll call this part num. Okay, and now we can grab this and copy it and then paste it. Okay, now it's very important that we return an ID here. This warning is telling us that we need to return an ID. We need to return something. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to allow NSObjects init to actually do its work on this object. In other words, we're going to call up to this object superclass. This object superclass is NSObject. So we're going to say self equals and then init. Now, what that will do is it will call NSObjects version of the init method on part and allow part to initialize up to that point. NSObjects in init really doesn't do a whole lot. It initializes the class and that's about it. But what we want is a special version of init with name and number, to be able to go ahead and set the part name and the part number. So that's what we're doing. Now, if that failed, then we got a problem. So we want to make sure that self is not equal to nothing at all. And there's another special keyword in Objective-C called nil, and that means no object. It's an empty object. So we want to say if self, and we could say not equal to nil, but nil returns 0. So we can just say if self to check and see if this is a valid object after it's been inited. Then we can say self.name is equal to part name, and self.number is equal to part num. So we're setting inside this init with name and number method. And then finally, we return an object of type ID. Well, the only object of type ID that we have right now to return is, that's right, self. And that's it. So now we can save this. Oops, semicolon. So now we can save it. Okay. And let's see, we're showing a couple of errors. Oh, we need to import part. There we go. Fix that. And now it just says we haven't used my part. So now if we've initted it with name, widget, and number 36, we ought to be able to get those back out. So now we'll just say printf let's see, widget, and then the number, and then we can just say self, or I'm sorry, part, my part, not self, my part dot name, and my part dot number, and there we are. So we ought to see widget comma 37. So let's run that and see what we get. Oh, widget comma 36, that's right. So now what we've done is we have created a new version of init that instantiates a part using NSObject's initializer and then sets the part name and the part number. There's a couple of things I want you to get out of this. The first is how to override the init function and call up to the supers init function to do whatever you want to initialize the object. And then also the technique of interleaving the parameters with the parts of the method name. So we have sent the init with name and number message with the parameters string widget and 36. Thank you.